Imagine a world untouched by time, where giants walked the earth. A vast herd of sauropods, colossal creatures with necks like cranes and bodies the size of small hills, grazed peacefully near the base of a mountain. This mountain was an ancient sentinel, a landmark that had stood silent and unchanging for millions of years. For generations of these gentle giants, it was simply part of the scenery, a constant backdrop to their lives of munching on high branches and migrating across endless plains. But this morning was different. Something was wrong. It began as a subtle vibration, a low hum that resonated through the solace of their massive feet. At first, it was easy to dismiss, perhaps the distant rumble of a stampede or a far-off storm. But the hum grew into a deep, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the world. The ground, once so solid and dependable, shuddered beneath them. Small pebbles, disturbed from their ancient rest, began to dance and skitter down the slopes. The sauropods paused their grazing, their huge heads lifting from the treetops, their dark, placid eyes blinking in confusion. A young titanosaur, barely an adult and still dwarfed by the true elders of the herd, looked up at the mountain. He'd never known it to do anything but stand there. Now he saw thin, spidery cracks racing across its sheer rock faces like lightning bolts frozen in stone. A fine powder, the dust of ages, puffed from these new fissures as if the mountain itself was exhaling a long-held breath. The air, usually clean and filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, became thick and gritty. The other dinosaurs were growing restless now, their low rumbles of contentment replaced by anxious bellows that echoed across the valley. Without any further warning, the growl escalated into a deafening roar. It wasn't the sound of an animal, but the sound of the world breaking apart. A massive section of the mountain, a slab of rock 1,000 feet high, groaned in protest and then sheared away from the main peak. For a heart-stopping moment, it hung suspended in the air, a city-sized chunk of granite defying gravity. Then, with a cataclysmic crash that shook the heavens, it plunged into the valley below. The impact sent a shockwave of displaced air and debris blasting outwards, flattening trees and kicking up a colossal cloud of dust that blotted out the sun. The herd panicked. Their calls of confusion turned into bellowing cries of pure terror. They turned to run, a chaotic stampede of multi-ton bodies crashing through the forest, their powerful legs churning the ground into mud. The young titanosaur, swept along in the frantic retreat, risked a glance back over his shoulder. The sky above the wounded mountain was no longer blue. It was flickering with a strange, unholy glow, a pulsating light from somewhere far, far beyond the horizon. It painted the churning dust clouds in shades of orange and red, like a sunset on fire. But it was the feeling, more than the sight or sound, that truly terrified him. The vibrations pulsing through the ground were no longer random tremors. They had a rhythm, a steady, pounding beat like a colossal drum. It was a message, an ominous signal traveling through the crust of the planet from an unknown, distant source. It spoke of immense power and unimaginable change. The world they had known, the stable, predictable world of seasons and migrations, was trembling to its very core. This wasn't just a landslide. This was a beginning. The beginning of the end. The stampeding herd didn't know where they were going. They only knew they had to get away. Away from the groaning mountain, away from the flickering sky, away from the rhythmic heartbeat of a dying world. The young titanosaur ran with them, his own heart pounding in time with the terrible vibrations. The air was choked with dust, making every breath a struggle. The familiar landscape was now a nightmarish vision of falling rock and splintered trees. The rules of their existence, so simple and unchanging, had been shattered in an instant. As they fled, the phenomena only grew stranger. The distant glow in the sky intensified, pulsing faster and brighter. New tremors shook the ground, not just from the mountain, but from all directions, as if the entire continent were a drumhead being struck. The titanosaur could feel a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate inside his own bones. The elders of the herd, who had seen countless seasons and survived untold dangers, were just as terrified as the young. Their deep, rumbling calls were no longer commands or warnings, but cries of pure, unadulterated fear. This was more than a collapsing mountain. This was a planetary event, a cataclysm on a scale they couldn't possibly comprehend. The ground beneath their feet, the sky above their heads, the very air they breathed, it was all turning against them. The young titanosaur felt a profound sense of loss, a sorrow for the world that was vanishing before his eyes. The tranquil valley, the silent mountain, the predictable rhythm of their lives all gone, replaced by chaos and a terrifying unknown future. The vibrations from beyond the horizon grew stronger, the drumbeat of doom quickening its pace. Whatever was coming, it was vast, powerful, and utterly indifferent to the lives of the giants who had ruled the planet for so long. They were no longer masters of their domain. They were just refugees, fleeing a catastrophe they couldn't name. As the young titanosaur continued his desperate flight, one thought echoed in his mind. A thought shared by every creature in the terrified herd: the world would never be the same again. The age of dinosaurs was facing a dawn unlike any other, a dawn of fire and dust, heralding a long and terrible night from which they might never awaken. The mountain's groan was just the first note in a symphony of destruction, and the main chorus was yet to come.